Today we are discussing something no parent ever wants to face. Prescription drug abuse among children in our community continues to grow at an alarming rate. In fact, it is a national epidemic according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Because of that, we have developed a 4-part series covering just a slice of what is happening in and around Mission Viejo. In this 3rd part, we will discuss how too many good kids are making bad choices.
I made this poster up that you will see. It was an 8.5 by 11 poster, and I put it in sandwich windows, all the business windows. And I took it to the pharmacy close by over here in Laguna Niguel, and I went to the pharmacist there and I showed him the poster. And I said, tell me, I said, are a lot of these kids coming to you and are you filling the scripts for Opana? And he says, yes, all the time. And I said, really? I said, well, this is my son. I pointed it out, and these are his friends, and most of these kids passed away with Opana in their system. Why would you be filling these scripts? You can deny it, you can turn them away. And he said, don't come yelling at me, it's the doctor's fault.
And what is Opana for? What's it designed?
For terminal cancer.
Brain cancer, isn't it? Like the worst form of brain cancer that's so painful that...
Yes, it's for terminal cancer, extreme pain. And these physicians that prescribe it and the pharmacists that fill the scripts know that these kids don't need it. They know that.
What kinds of drugs are you seeing come back in the toxicology reports?
Overwhelmingly are opioids, your Vicodins, your Norcos. We're seeing a lot of Xanax as well come back. Another interesting trend we're seeing is women are catching up to men. It used to be male overdoses above and beyond more than females. And especially with the prescription medication, females and males are about neck to neck, which is a frightening statistic as well. And that again is with the opioids.
What are the latest drugs that are being used? I mean, one of the things I had heard is that kids now are using cough medicine and they're pouring it over ice at these parties, and it's almost like an icy. I mean, what kinds of drugs do you want parents to be aware of that kids are using in the wrong way?
Yeah, we call them street pharmacologists. There's people out there that are figuring out how to use easily available things to abuse. And one of the things you're talking about is a brand name drug called Robitussin, but it has an ingredient in it called guaifenesin, and most of them are sold as guaifenesin, or dextromethorphan. And the dextromethorphan is something that they found out that if you drink big quantities of it, it does wondrous things that they think. And it's called roboine, from the word Robitussin. And it's not the guaifenesin in it, but it's the dextromethorphan in it, which is a non-narcotic cough suppressant. But they're finding that so a parent should check, if they have, some kind of guaifenesin DM or something, that they should protect that. In California passed a law last year that every single dextromethorphan containing product, it has to be programmed into your computer, or your cash register computer, that brings up a screen that has to verify the person's age. So you have to be 18 to buy it. But that doesn't really solve the problem. It just makes it so that somebody has to produce some identification, when they're buying it. Opana came on the scene about a couple of years ago. It was just all of these really severe pain medicines are all for cancer people, whether it's oxycodone or Opana or fentanyl. It's all for people in severe pain. And what happened with Opana was the company that made it realized it was getting abused. So they reformulated it, and they reformulated it in a way that if a person overdosed on it deliberately or not deliberately, that before they had the opportunity to die, they would get really sick, throw up, get nausea, and seek help. The companies are constantly trying. They have a legitimate drug, but it's being abused. And Opana is just a more potent form of all the other stuff. And when somebody finds out that they get a certain effect from it, that's what they want.
What are the top 3 drugs that are being abused?
Well, they're actually combinations of drugs. There's, oxycodone and Xanax or alprazolam and Soma or carisoprodol. So you have a muscle relaxant, you have a benzodiazepine, which is the Xanax, and then you have oxycodone, which is a narcotic. And somehow or another, people take those 3 and it accomplishes something that they feel is good for them. And so that's another thing that pharmacists track and the DEA tracks, how many people are getting those 3 prescriptions together. That I would say most of the abuse, the most prescribed drug or the most sold drug, not necessarily prescribed drug, is a combination of hydrocodone and Tylenol. And it's known as Vicodin, it's known as Norco, it's known as Lortabs. But what they found out was that people that were taking too much of this were getting so much acetaminophen or Tylenol that was destroying their liver. So the drug companies have just come out with a reformulation where it has the same amount of hydrocodone but less acetaminophen, which makes no sense. But you see, that's the thing. The far and away the most sold drug is the generics for Vicodin and Norco. And I'm not sure what street value is, but I've heard that one of those sets of an oxycodone Soma Xanax is about $25 a baggie. I mean, and this stuff is worth pennies. So those are the drugs that are abused, and those are the drugs that legitimately, if a person goes in and has a skiing accident, breaks a leg or something, they're going to give them one of those pills.
One of the other things I've heard is that most drugs now have a time release coating on them, and so kids are cutting them in half, thinking that they're getting half the strength of the drug. Could you maybe explain?
Well, I think that's more to do with drugs that have a certain time release mechanism. If people can remember back to Contact, that was the very first, they had 800 tiny time capsules, and each pellet was coated to dissolve at a different pace, and the company patented that. But now there's all kinds of them. OxyContin, for example, has a drug in a matrix. And so if you cut it or crush it, instead of getting it delivered over an 8 to 12 hour period, you're going to get it in one big, blast. So the part of the problem is that you have to check with your pharmacist or your doctor. If the drug doesn't have a what they call a score, which is a line in it, it really isn't designed to be split. And then there are some drugs that if you split can cause infinitely greater damage than if you took it whole. You're better off getting, a lesser strength. We're finding now that there's a lot of people that are taking heart medicine and stuff like that, and they're buying a stronger strength and taking half of it because that's their dose. So that may be a legitimate reason to do it, but to split a time release narcotic would be danger for sure. The more you take, the more you want to take. That people, it's not uncommon to be on Vicodin and end up taking 16 or 20 of them, not realizing that you're way over the dose of Tylenol. Used to be, the government said you shouldn't take more than 4,000 milligrams of Tylenol in a day. Well, now they've released it to 3,000 milligrams of Tylenol in a day. So 3,000 milligrams, that's the equivalent of 6 extra strength Tylenol, or anybody's brand of the same. So if you take that and then you put that to the drug, the narcotic that is bound with Tylenol, it's the same thing. It may not be over a long period of time that the narcotic kills you. It's the liver, and people are, the liver is damaged. They're on the liver transplant list. They can't get a liver. It's sometimes the secondary problem that is compounded by the original problem.
Ecstasy, which was called a designer drug, which is a type of amphetamine, is commonly used and commonly taken by young people who are attending concerts. Raves. Well, not only raves. Raves still occur, but the electronic music, things like dubstep or heavy electronics, synthetic, loud, repetitive, bassy beats, seem to attract the use of ecstasy to increase the sensory overload. Anyway, the point is that ecstasy is an amphetamine, and amphetamines cause your metabolism to increase. Now, when you have increased metabolism, you have increased in temperature. And when you're at a party and you're dancing and you're taking these amphetamines where your temperature goes up, you have a tendency to consume a lot of water. And so what happens is, by the nature of the drug itself and by the ingestion of we call free water without any electrolytes in it, it changes the body's chemistry and lowers the serum sodium. And when the serum sodium drops to a certain critical level, it causes a seizure. It's not uncommon for people who have taken ecstasy, who have consumed a large amount of free water, to drop their serum sodium, increase their temperature 104, 105, to have a seizure. And when you have a seizure, it's another episode with an unprotected airway. And so vomiting in that environment and aspirating those contents back into the lungs, thereby causing lack of oxygen to the brain, can end up in a very tragic result. And we see kids that have come in that have brain injuries related to that phenomena. So these are not benign substances. We see a lot of ecstasy still. We see a lot of amphetamines or amphetamine lookalikes, drugs that kids are taking on college campuses to stay up and study, things like Adderall, Concerta. Those are stimulants, those are study pills. They're very common on college campuses. And so we see the problems related to the prescription amphetamines as well. There's a whole category of hallucinogens that are becoming more popular once again.
I had just heard recently, in the last couple of hours, as a matter of fact, that Adderall is being used by college students, and what is it that does? Even, you know, I know that we talked earlier about ADHD and that it helps them manage their ADHD, but what does Adderall do to somebody like me who doesn't have ADHD?
Well, if you were going to go back to med school or pharmacy school, and you had a whole lot of information you needed to learn and memorize and comprehend, and a short period of time to do it, those drugs enhance your ability to learn through some secondary mechanism. You know, whether it's the fact that it keeps you awake, whether it helps you remember. You know, back in the 60s, it was Ritalin. Ritalin was called vitamin R, and people would take that to pull all-nighters, or, you know, they would be able to study more, retain more, take their test, and then crash for 3 or 4 days. So I don't like to talk about this because I don't want to make it sound like it's an acceptable thing to do. But your question was, why do college kids take that? And I would say that most often the use is around finals or midterms or stuff like that.
And what are the detrimental effects then of taking that, you know, over the long term?
That's a great question. You know, if you don't have ADHD or something like that and you're taking a drug for that, besides helping you maybe retain the information, what are their long-term effects? Well, psychological dependency and habit forming certainly jump up there. And then it causes things like you lose your appetite. You get to the point where you can't eat, you don't want to eat, that you have super highs and super lows. And when you're on it, you know, you're doing this and that. And then when you go off of it or you don't have it, then all you want to do is sleep, and you're not a performing function of society. So I think the moral of the story is that these drugs were all invented for a reason. And as long as we take them within the parameters of why they were discovered and how they should be used, I think that there's tremendous uses for them. Even the most addictive drugs. The problem comes in when they get abused or used for other things than they're supposed to be.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the marijuana and maybe how it's changed since I was in high school, which is in the 60s, and college in the 70s, how it's changed from then until now.
It's changed a lot. You know, as you said, growing up in the 60s and 70s myself, it was just kind of rolled up in paper. You know, they just kind of dried it out and be able to smoke it or use the bong. Today,
and a bong is?
It's a device with water in it to cool so it doesn't burn the lungs and stuff when they inhale. But what people have been able to do today is be able to, when they actually mate the plants and they grow these plants inside the homes or in these special gardens or whatever you want to call it, I forget what they actually call it, but they're able to increase the THC level in the actual plant itself. So over the years, you know, back then it may have only been 3% THC level. Well, now they're growing plants that are probably in the plus 20% range.
Back then, marijuana, the THC level, which is the chemical from marijuana that produces the high, was like 1 to 2%. That was how strong it was. Over the years, now you start looking at how it has a medical reason that it helps. And I've heard good stories that it does. It's being grown and engineered where the THC level is 20, 25% stronger. So now they're smoking stronger marijuana, and it's either producing a greater high. And I've been told by people who actually have medical cards that there's 2 types of marijuana when it comes to, there's one that produces a body high and one that produces a numbness in their brain high, all depending on what type of ailment they have, and the doctors have figured it out, and you need this. And then when I was talking earlier about oils, people have figured out how to extract the THC from the marijuana into its purest form, and it's making it 85, 95% pure.
Oh my gosh.
And they're taking that, I've seen video and heard kids, what they would do is take their bong or their pipe, and which kids call their piece, to smoke their marijuana with. They'll pack in a bowl, they'll put their marijuana in it, then they'll put either the dab, they call it the wax, which is the pure THC, they put that on addition. So you're getting 20% from your traditional leaf, and now you're adding 80, 90% of the wax marijuana THC on top of it, and you're smoking it.
The potency of drugs has changed. You know, back in our day, or my day, marijuana, was $100 or $200 for a kilogram. And now I believe marijuana is $400 or $500 for an ounce. So, and marijuana is not purchased in that quantity. And the point being is that the potency of this drug is not in the quantity anymore. The potency is in a gram of substance. It's so strong, these things, they're so potent that I changed my feeling about the gateway concept, because I had many friends who used marijuana back in the 70s who are very productive individuals who didn't end up as addicted people. But I think that the substance potency now is so much stronger and so much more difficult. And if you're introduced to OxyContin and you enjoy that, or you like that feeling and you have access to it, boy, that's a whole lot different than Tylenol number 2 or Tylenol number 3. We're starting off at a point on the curve that's way up here.
Think of me as a parent. I've got 2 teenagers and I'm seeing some changes in behavior. What kind of paraphernalia, what kind of things am I looking for? What's a vapor pen look like?
A pen can look like a normal pen.
Like this?
Yeah, about that size.
Okay.
Where they might be a little wider. They come in various different colors. What they have is they have a device that has a battery in there that they push on it to charge. It can pour in with the nicotine, the liquid nicotine, which kind of charges it and causes it to vaporize, and then they put it up their mouth and just inhale it, and it's the vapor. or they have other devices you can put, you can change it out, and specifically for the marijuana, it has to be heated up a little bit more to be able to cause the butter or the dab or the wax to melt to make it vaporize to be able to inhale that. But they do come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So parents like you and I, when we look at it, okay, that's nothing to be shocked at. We all know most people know what a bong looks like. Or we would be concerned if there was a needle with some brown substance to it. We know what that might be, heroin, or might be meth, or we see a bent spoon. Those types of things we obviously know. But when it comes to these G pens and vapor pens, a lot of people don't know. In the last maybe 5-6 years, and maybe even longer, there's been a lot of things changed among drugs themselves. In fact, the alcohol is being used. What kids are today, and they just learn from looking at watching the YouTube, is how to vaporize alcohol. How they put it in a bottle, they pressurize it, and causes vapors. They inhale it. They get drunk off that. How dangerous is that? That could be very, very dangerous because it doesn't go through the normal digestive system. And they get drunk rather quickly. And can they get alcohol poisoning? Yes, because now the body is not going through the normal digestive system. It doesn't know how to expel it. Normally you would throw up and stuff, but that has become a popular issue. We also have what a lot of the kids are doing is they're using the tampons, the boys and the girls, and inserting themselves in their cavities because it's going straight into the bloodstream. Having a lot of problems with that at some of these parties and stuff. We have the prescription.
And the way that they're doing that is dipping it in alcohol.
They're soaking it in alcohol. The gummy bears are soaking it in vodka, and they're taking those. These kids they're thinking outside the box.
Very creative.
Very
if we could just channel that energy, I mean, they could probably find the cure to cancer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And these are, majority are really good kids. Kids that we would never, ever think they're just going out to have some fun with some friends. But when they go to these parties, the things that's being seen, because they're so interactive with the social medias and stuff, this stuff pops up. They find it and they learn about it, and then they want to go try it. They're curious. See their friends doing it. You have prescription where there's a huge problem where they're raiding our medicine cabinets. Prescriptions that you or your loved one or I take, and they're ready available. All they have to do is go in a cabinet, take one or two. Then they go to these parties, they put them in a bowl, and then they just reach in and grab a color or a certain pill and pop it. Then they try to sit there and figure out what pill you took, whether you took a downer or Vicodin or whatever, and because they go by the symptoms. And of course, they ended up doing mixing with alcohol. How dangerous is that? And they become addicted to it. Then you have some of these synthetic drugs, bath salts. They weren't around 5-6 years ago, and those have horrible effects and hallucinations and violent tendencies with these people, and they're out of control. And it's sort of like being on PCP.
Bath salts are not bath salts that you put into the tub.
No.
Okay, so explain a little bit about this.
Bath salts is a chemical, powder that they've created that at one point in time, I think they're illegal to sell in our stores, but they can still buy them across on the internet and have them shipped from Europe.
And that's what it's called, or bath salts?
Well, they're bath salts, but there's all kinds of different names. Ivory, cloud, that they put on it, they package it a certain way. They put on there not for human consumption, but yet these kids take it and they will snort it and inhale it, ingest it in their body, and immediately begin to feel the effects. It's a higher intense and very, very, very dangerous for the body. The other synthetic marijuana stuff, where it's not necessarily marijuana, maybe more like potpourri, where they put some chemical on there, they dry it out, then they smoke it. Salvia, which comes from a natural plant, which has a very intense high. They smoke it like in a bong, like they do with marijuana. You got kids that are huffing.
What does that mean?
They're inhaling. They're huffing certain chemicals inside the house, in inhalants, like especially with the computer dusters and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, that is a growing thing too, especially with those whippet things that for the whipped cream that a lot of the businesses will pay. You have adults that are buying these things by the cases, and they're inhaling those 50 a day. That I've personally have been involved in it, and some of the young people are taking it and inhaling it, and of course they can black out. It only lasts, maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds, but that can certainly cause a lot of damage to the brain. Back in my day, back in the 70s, we had a lot of people inhaling paint. Some still do. We were doing a much better job by locking up all those paint and certain model glues and things. But there's other chemicals and stuff that they're finding. The whipped cream canisters, you turn upside down, the nitrous oxide that's in them, the kids are inhaling that. And I've only been involved in this. Things have changed. I didn't know what waxing was up until one of my last couple of weeks in patrol. I went to a call where they had a girl, apparently she had been sexually assaulted, and she went to a party and she mentioned there was wax. I'm going, wax? A candle wax? You assaulted with a candle? A candle? Or she says, no, it's a drug. I'm going, drug? What are you talking about? Well, it's marijuana. I'm going, and it took me a while, and I went back and asked some people that it's that where they take the marijuana and they put it into a tube and they put the butane, which runs through it, and it strips away off all the leaves and the stems, that THC, and have a filter that drains out and drains into a bowl. They heat the bowl and they cook away the butane, and what they end up with is a wax. And then they take that and they put that in their pipe, or they put that in a marijuana joint, and they smoke it, and they get a much, much higher, intense high.
Alcohol is the number one because it's easier to hide. The kids will take it and they'll pour it in a sports drink bottle like Gatorade, anything that's got color to it, that fruity stuff. And they usually are getting alcohol from mom and dad's house who have this for entertainment. And then they'll just mix it and be walking around campus with it. And when it comes to alcohol, your body size and weight is key, how fast you consume it, how intoxicated you get. So a 13, 14-year-old weighing 70, 80 pounds drinking 80 proof vodka after half of it, and there it is, totally drunk. Then marijuana and pills are the big thing, and there's so many different forms of marijuana now. We've seen the traditional leaf form. We found stuff, they're calling it oil or dabs. They also call it wax. And these kids learned about these certain forms from YouTube. Usually symptoms are, red eyes, droopy eyelids, slow monotone speech, a little lethargic. The chemical is going to suppress the emotions. It's going to make you feel just relaxed.
So what are you finding in schools as far as prescription drugs are concerned?
The last school year, the main thing I found was actually antidepressants, Adderall, stuff like that. Stuff that's, it's going to bring the body down. Supposedly, kids are saying, yeah, I just feel depressed or whatever because of school, so they're taking stuff for depression. The year before that, OxyContin was a big thing, but it wasn't as big as marijuana and alcohol was, because I've been helping the schools. Those have been my two biggest things. I've heard other SROs throughout the county talking. Last year we had one meth incident, and we had one heroin incident. But years before that, before I started the program, that's when I was hearing a lot of schools having problems with OxyContin and stuff like that. And when kids can't get OxyContin anymore because it is a synthetic opiate, which is heroin, that's when they resort to the street level version of heroin and finding it. School district has policies in place where for some people have to take medication, insulin shots and stuff like that. So technically they're supposed to they can't self-carry their meds. They have to give them to the school staff, and therefore they'll come up at like whatever time it is. I'm here for this. If a child or even a teenager or junior high or high school kid has a type of medication on them that without a doctor's prescription, they can receive a ticket from me for possession of depending on what kind of drug it is, possession of a drug without doctor's prescription. If it's a controlled substance like an Oxycontin and stuff like that, that's a felony in the state of California. Then that's just for me. Then the school's going to suspend them for 5 days, or I take it back. They can suspend them. They have the option of how long it's going to be: 1 day, 3 day, 5 day.
We have I'm not sure what it is, but a friend of mine and I were hiking out by the dog park over by Gilleran Park, and we were on a ridge path, and in addition to seeing a skunk, by the way, which thank God we weren't sprayed, but I also found this, and it seems that this has been a congregating place for kids to go up on the ridge. It's over near Oso, and in between Oso and the dog park. And would you kind of tell us what you think that might be? It had a weird odor to it. In fact, my hand smelled when I first touched it.
It looks like a tip from like a blowtorch, because it has threads in here, and it has the opening here. But this is something typically that if you found this in your child's room, unless they're doing soldering on the side, they would turn this into a smoking device. Yeah, it actually is. This would make a pretty good one from ones that I've seen. I've seen kids make smoking devices out of you can buy some nice fake look. I mean, like not really fake ones. They're like daily objects that you would use. Like for instance, I seen one that had a socket wrench that was converted in one. I seen an air pressure gauge that had anything removed out of it to smoke. But this was like it could have been used actually maybe to light something, or it was going to be used to make it into an actual to smoke marijuana, anything else that's like, I don't think you can get meth in there, but meth's usually a little bit smaller. This would be a great thing just to pack a little marijuana in it, probably here on this end here because it has the vents. That way when you light it, it would get more air to it for it to burn, and you inhale the smoke from this side. The area of the park you're talking about, if people who live in the area, they suspect something's going on. I don't know if they have a neighborhood watch, but they can probably help create a neighborhood watch. If they start seeing stuff, call the sheriff's department. Deputies get there as soon as they can. I mean, most likely if they're finding other paraphernalia there, then there's probably a place the kids have found that think is cool because of the location, and it could be a tactical advantage where they can see anyone coming from around. That way it gives them an opportunity to get away, to evade the police if they come up there looking for them. So, but if there's a community, if there's an association, they can contact their association and say, hey, we found this, can we clean it up? Boom, and they can come in and clean up any like couches or picnic tables that was moved within the community. They can move it back. That's what your association dues pay for. But if it's paraphernalia, if it's needles, yeah, I would start getting concerned because you don't want no one stepping on a needle, and especially if they're doing drugs. Possible there's a disease or there, and younger kids walking by, they're not gonna. They may either step on it or, hey, mommy, look at this, and that's when you need to start calling the sheriff's department, or even contacting the Mission Viejo substation, or even come to City Hall and talk to our administrative sergeant or deputy upstairs. That way they can get the information to the deputies in the city, or even to our special enforcement team, or even to the narcotics officers for South Orange County. They may know something already and have an investigation in the process of someone who they know in that area is doing that. Each contract city in Orange County has a deputy, and their sole purpose is to educate when it comes to drugs to the community, along the schools. We have our names are on the department website. My email address is on there. My work cell phone number is on there. If parents just have questions about drugs, or groups are looking for presentations, they can go through the city and say, hey, like a Boy Scout, someone wants to talk on just drugs. We also do parents only. And our parents only ones are really, I guess you can call it racy or not, but we really push out information in a different way there versus the kids. And we don't really want to offend anyone, but sometimes we have to show stuff that is a little bit harder. But yet every city has a DLO program. We just did a drug summit. We shared with the city of Lake Forest, our drug liaison officer. There's more coming up in the future for drug summits. I don't know what the topic's going to be yet, but as soon as we do, we all get together and we start making the PowerPoint presentations and getting the visual aids and get it out to the community as fast as we can.
What kinds of substances are you finding out about that these young adolescents especially, what are they starting with? What are they continuing? What substances are they attracted to?
You know, the range varies because you're seeing alcohol, marijuana. I think the biggest concern is definitely, medication that they're getting from a medicine cabinet that parents are completely unaware that their children are already starting to get in, take stuff that you wouldn't even imagine that they would want to get high on.
Well, I always considered myself a mom in the know, right up there, hip, all the rap stuff. I thought I had it dialed in. And my daughter called me from Dana Hills High School in May of 2010, screaming that Mark Melkonian had passed away. And Mark was a childhood friend of hers and one of the most outgoing, not an enemy in the world kind of kid. And when I found him,
handsome.
Totally. And I found out what he died from, and he died from an overdose of Opana. And I had no idea what Opana was, so doing a little bit of research, I found out it's a really end-stage opiate that they give to end-stage cancer patients or patients in chronic 24/7 pain. So when I went to his funeral, it was packed. The room was packed, thousands of people into this tiny little church. And I thought that that moment would change a lot of these kids' lives, seeing a young man's life snuffed out because of a stupid choice, and it didn't. I found out after that there were many more overdoses, and that I found out through that process just how rampant this drug problem is. And I own a performing arts school in Laguna Hills called the Performers Academy. Brent Tuff is a film director. He teaches workshops there. And I said, there's a story to tell here. Do you want to tell it with me? And he said, yes. So I threw in the seed money and off we went running. And we put together a list of people, parents, to see what the story might be. We thought we were going to shoot a little short. And it turned out that we had to turn people away because they were just coming in droves to tell the story of how they lost their child or dealing with addiction. Here in Orange County, that was a surprise. Blue ribbon schools, mega churches, all kinds of activities that parents are killing themselves to give their kid a leg up in life. And how are they winding up addicted to opiates and then to heroin?
So we have a very, very significant problem in Orange County. Being in South Orange County, the problem is tremendous. We see, well, of course, it's now become the leading cause of death in the 16 to 24 age group, where accidents and alcohol-related injuries were the leading cause of death. Now it's prescription drug use. But we're talking about OxyContin, Opana, morphine, and then heroin. And so we see the full gamut of these drugs. They're very available. Parents need to be aware about the internet. They need to know that all of this stuff is available. As a matter of fact, you can go on the internet today having bought a drug on the street, and there are websites which will tell you whether you got a good deal on the medication or not. It's not very difficult to obtain drugs these days. It's a matter of having the right access and money. Opiates are very, very strong respiratory depressants, and that's probably one of the most dangerous aspects of opiates. They affect the brain's center for respiration and depress that. And so when we see people in the hospital that are on opiates, the most common, or one of the most common presentations, is respiratory depression or the absence of breathing. And of course, as you know, you need to breathe. The brain deprived of oxygen for a very brief period of time is extremely dangerous. It's not unusual for somebody who has experienced or is experiencing respiratory depression to vomit. And to be quite blunt about this, you lose the protective mechanism to protect your airway. When you're fully awake and alert and throw up, you're able to protect your airway by way of a specialized tissue called the epiglottis. But in drug overdose, you lose the ability to protect your airway. And so aspiration or breathing in vomit into the lungs is a very common scenario, which ultimately ends up in a very, very significant pneumonia, and quite often can be the cause of death. Now, one of the common things that I see are the withdrawal symptoms of drugs. Now, when you take an opiate, you get high. It causes euphoria. It can cause nausea. It can excite people and then make them sleepy. But when you stop these drugs over a period of hours, you start to go into a withdrawal syndrome. Now, again, that's dose dependent and duration dependent. Somebody who's been taking opiates for a period of time, who stops taking them abruptly, begin to withdraw. And those are very, very obvious signs to a clinician, but maybe not so obvious to a parent because it may look like the flu. And so the things that we see are agitation, insomnia, stomach cramps, diarrhea, sweating. The skin may look like turkey skin, hence the term going cold turkey. Agitation, hence the term kicking the habit. So all of these sort of presenting signs of opiate withdrawal may look like the flu. And so if you see your child repetitively having episodes every couple of weeks when they've run out of opiates, you have to be really suspicious that this is a withdrawal phenomena.
Have you actually gotten parents to bring kids in here, parents that brought their kids in and they're in withdrawals and the parents don't know it, they think it's the flu?
Oh, absolutely. Oh. Absolutely. And it's sometimes a very difficult and sensitive situation to have a 15 or 16-year-old individual, and now females are becoming the greater risk than males.
Why is that?
It's just more popular. It seems that if you look at statistics, the at-risk population are the adolescent female. Of course, the adolescent male is as well. Mm-hmm. But yes, it's not unusual for them to come in, and when you make that diagnosis in somebody who could be an A student, it's very disturbing to the parents. Remember, how do parents find out? Parents find out because they're called by a doctor, they're called by a police officer, they're called by the coroner, they're called by the school principal. And so these are all alarming phone calls to get, and they're usually quite significant.
Do you ever have people, young people, it doesn't matter, that come in and they're here primarily to get drugs? For you to write a prescription, has that happened?
Oh, absolutely. It happens on a daily basis, several times a day.
And
in every emergency department in this country, it happens. The drug-seeking behavior. Let me just try to give you a sense. These are very addictive, very potent medications that, when they're discontinued, the withdrawal symptoms from them are so intense and so severe that an individual will be driven to obtain a replacement in any way, shape, or form. It's that problematic. And so quite often we see drug-seeking behavior because of the withdrawal issues, not because they need the medicine to get high, but it's to prevent them from going through this very uncomfortable process called withdrawal. You won't believe this, but one of the most commonly abused medications that we see is Ambien. They're sleeping pills. Yes. And so Ambien is, I believe, one of the most prescribed medications in this country, and very highly addictive and very commonly abused. In addition to Ambien, it's common for us to see Xanax being abused. Xanax comes in different strengths. The strength that people like to use or abuse are the 2 milligram Xanax, and they're shaped in a bar, and commonly known as Xanny bars. That's what they're known as on the street. So Valium, Ativan, lorazepam, Xanax, Ambien, they produce a withdrawal too, but the withdrawal from the benzodiazepines is particularly dangerous and can be life-threatening. And so these are a one-way street. I think you're getting the picture that this is not a road to success. This is not a road that has a good, beautiful vista at the end of it. This is a dead end. This is a very, very tragic dead end. And once you're on the road, it's very hard to get off the road.
Approximately how many on average do you get drug addicted, overdoses, any of that per week? Just an average.
Well, I would say we get several per day. And so put it in that tone. Again, they vary from somebody being brought in from school with a zero tolerance policy where the student is observed to be acting a little funny, to cardiorespiratory arrest. I mean, I can't tell you how many overdoses I've seen in the last 2 years of young people that have died. Many. And I'm one of 16 physicians at this campus. In the 60s and 70s, it was not unusual to see the hallucinogens, LSD, mescaline, PCP, same category. But there's a resurgence of the hallucinogens. And now you can buy a lot of these things on the internet. We work in an environment where we want to have mutual trust. And so when an individual presents requesting a medication, it's very hard to ascertain pain, to understand how much pain somebody's in. Yes, typically your blood pressure may go up, and yes, your heart rate may go up when you're in pain, but not always. So somebody comes in and says, I'm in 9 out of 10 pain. It's hard to assess that. There's not a pain test. So we look at, for various features, we first look to see, do they have a physician? Do they live in the area? Have they been here before? We can check a website called Cures, which is for narcotic prescriptions. So we try to identify somebody who comes in who doesn't have a physician, or they're from out of town and they come in on a Saturday where we can't contact their doctor. We have red flags. But it's difficult. It's really, really difficult. And a lot of these individuals are very good at trying to obtain what they came to get. I took care of a gentleman once who came in and said that he was having some gastrointestinal bleeding, that he was throwing up blood. And he told me that whenever this happened, and if they needed to put down a tube into his stomach, we call it a nasogastric tube, that he required sedation for this. And he specifically said Valium. And so the nurses went in and drew his blood. And sometimes they'll label the tube and leave the extra tubes at the bedside in the event that the physician wants to order additional studies. And so I got called to the room to see this individual because he was bleeding. And he had blood dripping down the front of his mouth and shirt. But when he bent forward, the empty vials of blood fell out of his pocket. So that's how desperate this individual was. He was willing to get a nasogastric tube placed just so he could obtain Valium. That's desperation. Drug addiction and medications make very good storytellers out of individuals. It's been often said that a drug addict will steal your wallet and help you look for it.
You never know what's coming down the pipe. You know, when I grew up, it was just alcohol, tobacco, and you heard some heroin and cocaine. Methamphetamine hadn't even been on the scene then. But now they've taken that and raised the level to how it's ingested and used, and then they bring in other drugs. And it's an ever battle that law enforcement and DEA and schools and everybody, you know, these outreach groups that we're constantly fighting, and it's tough, but it's a battle that we got to continue to wage and fight. Otherwise, we're going to lose a whole lot more kids.
A lot of cases, these people have been through so much, and their family knows. I mean, how many times you talk to them and they said, well, they've been in rehab 3 or 4 times, or we thought they were sober for a couple months, or, you know, I was watching your medications, and they know there's a problem and they've been trying to help them. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking when you talk to some of these families is they're trying. They're trying, they know there's a problem, and they just love this person, and they're trying everything they can, and they do know what's going on.
In recovery, they say it's a day at a time. You can never expect or anticipate that, you know, relapse is part of recovery. It is what it is. You have to find the coping skills, keep structure, ensure that you're working your program always. So you have to go to meetings. The kid said it beautifully in a send-off that we had with one kid. It's just, you need to be in fellowship. If you go back to old friends, if you go back to the old ways, you're going to relapse. Hang out with kids who are in recovery. Hang out with the kids who are already going to meetings and have sponsors. We're going to have fun. We're still kids. We're just doing it without drugs. So the fellowship piece, I told the adolescent, I'm going to steal that from you. That was so insightful, that it's a way to really communicate that that's how you can stay in recovery. So there is no kind of set amount of time that you see that people, it's really just desire to stay sober. So you can see kids who do very well and relapse right away, and others who can really stay in recovery and they're just challenged. So we have a live-out program. We want them to come and participate and be part of alumni. We want them to be going to meetings. Kids will say, I'm bored, I have a lot of free time, stop going to my meetings. I was triggered, I was tempted. Someone said, how come? Well, I'm not using my drug of choice, but I'm smoking pot. Well, recovery is recovery, and it means abstaining completely. So every case is different. So you find that kids that you think have a good prognosis and are going to do very well, don't. And kids that didn't eventually get the message and really want to stop. So it's something that is a daily struggle. So you want to give them a lot of resources. And for us, we're a safe haven. Kids want to come back. If they feel, you know, troubled or they're struggling, we want them to come back and they can come to a group. They can talk to a therapist. What we find with adolescents anyway is just depending on the amount of time they've been able to stay, the amount of progress we were able to make in treatment, if they come to aftercare, the probability of recovery is much higher. When they stop coming, when they're not following through, when we hear that they didn't continue in outpatient, the probability is low. Mm-hmm. And they usually come back and let us know. The kids are remarkable in kind of letting us know who started using again and who's not doing well. And what we're saying is come back. Even if you've used, we don't want you to be under the influence when you come, but we can start again. You can start your sobriety all over again. So it doesn't mean that you're marked for life. It means you're going to struggle and fall, but we're going to help you get back up. If people in general just go with an open mind, as soon as you start to minimize, deny, avoid, you're creating the problem. If people can just accept it, it is what it is. You're in this situation, do something. Yeah. Whatever that is, just do something. Reach out to a friend, go to the school, ask your insurance company. Online, it's just remarkable. If you just Google parent support groups, parent education, it's out there. When people find the network, they were lost for so long because you think it's just me. It couldn't possibly. The shame I think people, feel and experience. you know, it is what it is. So just address it and deal with it.
Yeah.
You're going to find a lot of openness and acceptance, and I think we're looking even just with mental health and the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, what we're saying is mind and body go hand in hand. So if you break your arm, you go and seek treatment. If you let it just heal on its own, it's not going to heal properly, so you go and get help.
But what has to happen? The bottom line is the parents need to be involved in this process. They need counseling, they need therapy as well. You can't just send your child away to fix them and bring them back and think that everything's going to be okay. And when they get out of rehab, they have to be in some sort of a program. I don't think 30 days is enough. I personally think 18 months is where they should be to get the brain to heal and to come back to where they need to be. And I also think they need to be in either a 12-step program or a religious-based program or something working the program with a support system that holds them accountable and allows them to live a clean life. And there's just several stories of parents who have done everything. One girl in the film went to 16 rehabs at the cost of $30,000 to $40,000 a rehab. And the last rehab she was in, she stayed sober an hour after she left. So these parents are going bankrupt trying to get their kids help. They walk out the door, they never know if they're going to see them alive again. And it's a disease that just doesn't only affect the child or the addict or the partier, it affects the whole family. It's devastating.
People relapse and people come in and they relapse, and sometimes you call it, I call it a convincer. They get into recovery, they're sober for a month or 2 or 3, and then they have to test it, you know, and they think, oh, maybe I can do that, maybe I can go back to just moderation. And then they test it and hopefully they don't die, and they come in back to get a quick little refresher course and a tune-up, and then we can get them on track. But most people that with long-term recovery didn't get it the first time. They got into treatment, and then they had a period of time, sometimes it takes about a year or year and a half of testing it, and then finally they get convinced, and then they get 20 years. In fact, I tell people, when they walk in, every patient is starting a 90-day brain healing project. There's your mood center, your craving center, your endorphin levels, the molecules of motion, they are going to be depleted, and you're going to start feeling better every week, but there's kind of a roller coaster for a couple of months. I mean, we could do brain scans on people's brains when they're first admitted, like Dr. Amen and the Amen Clinic and all these SPECT scans and functional brain scans. You can see dark spots in their brain where it's just not running. It's not like a stroke, it's totally different. But there's dormant areas and depleted areas of your brain, and they light up better a month from now. And then they light up better 2 months from now. Usually takes about 3 or 4 months to get a brain scan that looks like the real person. Technically, they're under the influence of these drugs for the next 90 days, the first 90 days of recovery. So basically, people have to start becoming used to the fact that the first 3 months of recovery is going to be they need some guidance and structure. They can't even trust their own brain. Technically, you're under the influence of your drug, even though the alcohol levels and the drug screens are all negative the first couple of weeks for sure. They're technically under the influence. Recovery and people in recovery can't afford to be bored either. They're not like a glum lot. People in recovery are very interesting. They don't deal with boredom very well. They can't afford the luxury of actually being bored, because that's kind of one of those triggers that could make you think about relapsing. You know, idle time is not a good idea. And so one of the very first assignments or steps is to admit, hey, you know what, this is really taking me out. This isn't just like a bad problem. I'm not gonna live very long. It's robbing me from everything I love in my life, and I'm not gonna be around, and I gotta throw in the towel, but that's how you win. You finally give up, proving that you can get more out of the drug than it can get out of you, and that's the only way you can win.
I'm an addict.